Hello guys, my name is Tom Antos, and in this video I want to talk about my experience of shooting video with the Nikon D850. I've already talked about the stills quality that this camera can deliver, and it was actually on my list of recommended gear for 2017 as probably the best DSLR in the market. But today I want to talk about video features. So this camera has a full frame 45.7 megapixel CMOS sensor. It can also shoot 4K video at up to 30 frames per second and 1080p video at up to 120 frames per second. On top of that, it also has an 8K time-lapse recording mode. So there's several good and bad things I want to mention about this camera. First, let's start off with the good. One of the features that I really like of this is just the design of the camera, the build quality, and this thing is really massive. It feels like you can go through war with it. For example, here, if I just show you the camera by itself, you'll notice right away that the camera is not the smallest camera, and that's so one of the things maybe I'll talk about later, but it does feel good in the hand. Just holding it, it feels solid. Everything here, like with the covers for all the ports, HDMI, all that stuff, is nicely protected, and it's just a good, kind of a, I would say, war-ready camera, weatherproofed, all that stuff. It feels like if you dropped it, it should survive most drops, although I wouldn't recommend it, obviously. But yeah, it's a very well-built camera. Another thing I like about it is the button layout. It's kind of just well thought out, clean. You can kind of get to all the buttons right here, usually from the back. You also have a few extra buttons, for example, here on the front for bracketing, for switch for manual to autofocus capabilities of this camera. It also has a PV button here, which is great because it lets you quickly kind of switch from manual exposure to automatic while you're recording video. So overall, yeah, it's just nicely laid out buttons. Now, one thing I will say though is that it is a big camera, and because of that, for an average size hands like me, I guess I would say medium size hands, it feels great, and holding this grip I can kind of reach all the buttons, including the two buttons here in the front. But if you got small hands, you might have problems. Big hands, again, I think will be very comfortable. So just keep that in mind. Another thing I really like is, for example, the LCD is nice and bright outside. You can actually adjust the brightness of it. And when I was shooting even in broad sunlight, I had no problem seeing this. So that's one good thing about the monitor. I wish, it articulates quite a bit, actually. It's almost 90 degrees looking down. But I just, and also when you're looking up, I kind of just wish they would do away with this and kind of do a full articulating, LCD on the back, like you get, for example, with the Panasonic GH5, where you can turn it around. So if you're getting a selfie or things like that, it will be just good for that. The camera also has dedicated headphone and mic jacks here on the tab. They're nicely laid out, easy to get to. They're not like so close together like some cameras where you might have problems plugging both at the same time. So that's nice. And this is also where you're going to find the USB connection and the HDMI. HDMI is not micro HDMI, which is a good thing. That connection is really horrible. But it is a mini HDMI, so it's better, but not as good as a full HDMI connection. Another thing I really love about this camera, just kind of from its build quality, is the mount. Actually, the mount on on this Nikon, and that's kind of true with most Nikon cameras, even back in the day with their SLRs. It's very well built. It can support a lot of weight. It just feels massive, feels solid. And you're gonna need that because, for example, there's some of their lenses, like this one, 70-200 f2.8, that I have from Nikon. It's a great lens, but it is big and heavy. So, yeah, it's just this mount. When whatever you attach to it, it's gonna hold it. And even with this, like I said, big heavy lens, there is no shaking, no rattling. There's not even a little bit of play. And this actually can be very handy, not just when you're working with Nikon lenses, but let's say if you put an adapter on there and you use some other third-party lenses that, let's say, might be like bigger cinema lenses. Now, when it comes to image quality itself, again, when it comes to stills photography, it's amazing. 45 megapixels, raw, 7 frames per second. You can't really beat that, and it's, like I said, just really beautiful looking photos. But I'm here to talk about the video. So the camera shoots in 4K. Then again, which camera these days doesn't shoot in 4K? So there's nothing new in there or nothing exciting, I would say. But the video itself, like if you're looking at it and you're wondering, can I shoot good quality 4K video with this? Absolutely. The video looks stunning, nice and crisp. There was no artifacts that I've noticed, no more anything like that. Yeah, it's just good quality 4K video. So it can, you can definitely rely on that if you're looking to get a 4K camera that can also shoot amazing stills. The camera can also shoot in 1080p. And when you're shooting in that mode, you can actually, you have basically more frame rate options. In 4K, you can only shoot up to 30 frames per second. There is a 25 and 24p mode. In 1080p, you have all those modes, but you can also shoot slow motion. And not only that, but you can actually get what kind of real true slow motion that you can play back right away in the camera, and you can kind of see how that looks. And you can shoot up to 120 frames per second. As you'll notice from the footage, the 1080p, even 120 frames per second, looks pretty damn good. Is it true 1080p, like pixel to pixel? Probably not. Then again, most cameras don't really offer that, especially when shooting at higher frame rates. But it still looks really good. There's no moire or any other weird kind of artifact showing up. So definitely a great slow motion shooter. And just an overall nice crisp 1080p video that it can shoot. It can also shoot, by the way, up to 60 frames per second, just a standard frame rate. Overall, great camera. Some other little features, things that I personally liked about it was actually this little I button up here. You click this, and when you're in video mode, you pretty much have access to all the things that you care about right there. So you can kind of go up and down and change the settings. So really nice feature there. And also there's another feature that I really like, which is the low ISO. I know most of us are looking into getting higher ISO cameras these days, shooting in low light. And this camera can do that up to 25,600 ISO. But for me, especially somebody who's shooting narrative or music video type of work, where I'm in control of my lighting, I'm not really excited by low light features that much. And like I said, this camera can shoot beautiful, clean, video up to 3200 ISO. It's no problem, and even beyond that. But again, if once you start getting into, let's say, 25,000 or 16,000 ISO, like you can see these shots here that I have of the deer, and there's no light there, then the video is only going to look so good. This camera was able to actually capture something, even though it was actually pretty much pitch black when I was there kind of looking at it with my eyes. So if you're wondering about the low light capabilities, this camera can definitely perform. Is it going to be as good as the Sony A7S II or maybe 3 coming out soon? Probably not, but it's close to there. Like I said, you're going to be able to shoot in low light, but if you really want to have nice, crisp kind of looking images without noise, then you kind of don't want to rely on low light, and you always want to add light anyways. But like I said, what I really like about this camera is that it actually has the low ISO, and I think that's what a lot of camera manufacturers these days are forgetting, is that they're kind of trying to reach for the higher ISO numbers, but they're forgetting that sometimes we do need lower ISO, especially when we're shooting outside in broad daylight with a really fast lens, and you don't want to use, let's say, ND filters or polarizers or whatever it is in front of your lens. To darken the image, and it's great to have that feature to kind of go down. So this goes down to 64 ISO. For me, if they could even lower that even more, or other manufacturers could, I think it would be a great feature. So what are some of the things I don't like about this camera? Well, the first thing that I was talking about before with the positives is the build quality. It's, like I said, big, massive, kind of sturdy camera. But then again, like I said, for smaller hands, people with smaller hands, it might not be the easiest to reach some of the buttons, especially the two in the front, or even some of the ones here in the back. So that's something to keep in mind. And overall, it's just, like I said, it's a bigger, heavier camera. So when I was trying to fly this on a gimbal, first of all, not all gimbals would even, like those 3-axis stabilizers, would even support the weight of this camera, because this does come in at just over 2 pounds, just the camera itself. So once you have the battery, the card, and then definitely one of those nice Nikon lenses, it becomes so heavy that most, like those handheld little 3-axis stabilizers, probably not going to take the weight of this. But even with some of these like kind of traditional gimbal stabilizers or like Steadicam-like devices, when I tried using this with those, again, it worked, but it just wasn't fun using it, because very quickly my wrist started hurting. Now when it comes to the AF, it's great when it's shooting stills, but not so good when you're shooting video. The screen in the back is actually a touch screen, so you can kind of touch and you can focus that way, but it's not really usable. It's okay if you just, for example, stop, or if you don't really care about, you know, basically that moment in the shot, because the second you touch it, you're gonna see it's gonna jump, it's gonna focus, but it's kind of does this weird kind of jump when it basically switches from one point to another. Like you can see up here, when I'm kind of touching this rock here in the foreground, and then when I touch the rock there in the background, and you'll see kind of does this quick little shift. The same thing here in these other test shots when I was really close to this tree. Again, AF works, but I would not, however, rely on the autofocus in the middle of a shot, because it would kind of not do it nicely, and it would just ruin my shot. So in that case, I would do it all manually here. Another weird thing about this camera is that when you're shooting in 4K, you cannot have electronic stabilization on. So the camera actually has kind of a, I would say, post kind of a stabilization that's all done electronically. But again, it doesn't work in 4K. You can also not turn on the peaking when you're shooting in 4K, which is again kind of a bummer when you're trying to nail focus and you're used to using focus peaking. In 1080p, you can use focus peaking or stabilization, but again, you cannot use the two of them at the same time. So you kind of have to choose, do I care more about having focus peaking on? And if that's the case, then you turn off the electronic stabilization, or vice versa. So it's kind of weird. I don't know why they did it like that, since they advertise themselves that they have a really powerful processor in there that can take those raw 45 megapixel photos. So I would think that that processor can handle shooting video in 4K or 1080p and being able to allow you to use peaking and electronic stabilization. But again, it doesn't work. Maybe they can fix it with a firmware. We'll see. The camera has a dual card slot, but it's for two different card types. So one is for SD, one is for XQD. And it's kind of weird. For me, I would personally prefer to either have XQD cards or SD cards and have it basically dual for those cards, because usually if you're gonna buy memory cards, you usually buy the same memory cards. And this will be a great feature, because then you could put in, let's say, the two SD cards in there. And then be good to kind of automatically be able to take photos and back them up onto your second card in case one of them fails. So I wish they would have done that, but again, that's just something personally that I would have preferred. When you're shooting video on this camera and you're looking for different image profiles, it's very limited options. So you're pretty much only getting 3 options, and that's portrait, landscape, and then flat. Flat is what I was using most of the time. It kind of gives you slightly wider dynamic range, and it looks good. I do like that profile. It produces semi-flat image, so it still allows you some color grading capabilities in post, but it also just looks good straight out of the camera. So even if you wanted to deliver that footage to a client, it's not going to look weird, as like a true log kind of image. Now, if you're wondering if you can shoot log, no, there is no options in shooting in log, or even further customizing the 3 profiles that they come with. So that's kind of a bummer. Like I said, it's kind of limited. It's okay for just shooting video right there, but if you're really thinking of this as like an advanced video camera and you're looking for some of those options, you're not going to find it. Another thing also you will not find is some of those, like I said, other advanced video features like vector scopes or RGB parades, things like that. You're not going to get it. You do have a histogram in there that you can enable, but that's pretty much it. I guess there is one function that you get, which is zebra, or basically this function they call highlight. So you can kind of see where the highlights are blowing out, or what levels they're at. But again, for me, that's not a feature that I usually use. So I would have preferred, for example, like a nice RGB parade. So in conclusion, what do I think about the Nikon D850? It's a great stills camera that also has nice video features. So if your primary use for this camera is going to be stills photography, but you want to have the option of shooting nice, crisp, 4K video, or even some slow motion in 1080p, then this is the camera for you. But if you're primarily, I would say, a video shooter who wants to also have the option of shooting, high resolution stills, then there's other options, I think, around the same price point. That are probably better suited than the Nikon D850, because, like I said, this camera's features are mainly concentrate on the stills photography. So Video, it's there, but it's not, you know, it doesn't have all the full kind of blown options. And so because of that, it's going to be a little bit limited. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment below, let me know what you liked about this video or what you didn't like. And also, if you want to check out more filmmaking gear reviews, lighting tutorials actually I have, or other kind of cinematography or filmmaking special effects even tutorials, you can find all of that on my website, along with some free stuff that I give away, like for example my custom LUTs, camera presets, downloadable footage, and a whole bunch of more. And again, you can find all of that on my website at tomantosfilms.com. And I'm going to see you guys next time. Bye!